Welcome everyone to another edition of Palace Off the Top Rope presents Smackdown. This is episode number 6, and it originally aired on September 23rd, 1999, emanating from Dallas, Texas. Now this is officially the go-home show for Unforgiven, the pay-per-view event. Usually they hammer it home on Raw that it's the go-home show, and this is the final sell for the pay-per-view. But we got another show after that, which is Smackdown, that they got to hype this up. So I'm calling this the official go-home show. And the show opens up with Vince McMahon coming out for a promo, kind of interestingly hyping up Triple H. As we all know, Vince McMahon won the WWE Championship on the previous episode. But on Monday Night Raw, he relinquished the title to Stone Cold Steve Austin. And not that Austin is the champion, but that, originally Vince McMahon wanted to stay true to the contract and not wanting to get involved in business affairs and whatnot. And the WWE title is officially business. And, he's trying to tell Stone Cold Steve Austin that on Monday. And Stone Cold's like, well, did you read the fine print of the contract? The only person who can put Vince McMahon back in power is, of course, Stone Cold Steve Austin himself. And now since Vince McMahon's officially now kind of playing a real babyface role after having faced Triple H and all that stuff. So Stone Cold Steve Austin puts him back in power. So what Vince McMahon does is relinquish the title. Austin says, or before any of this, Austin says that he will put him back in power if he gets a WWE title shot. And Vince says, hell yeah, I'll give you a title match, especially against, not against Triple H, but he says Triple H is going to have to compete in the six-pack challenge, but that Austin will get the title match immediately after, depending on who wins the matchup at a later date. But also, just to stick it to Triple H even a bit more, Vince McMahon appoints, now being back in power, he appoints Stone Cold Steve Austin to be the special guest enforcer for the six-pack challenge at the pay-per-view event, and that leads us, of course, to SmackDown. So he's hyping up Triple H weirdly and brings him out. And, he talks about being back in charge of WWE and, thanks Stone Cold for reinstating them and all that. But he's going to put Triple H through the ringer tonight. He says Triple H is going to be facing all the opponents from the six-pack challenge. Of course, Triple H gets all enraged and whatnot. But Vince McMahon says this is not going to be he's not going to fight them all in one match, but in separate matches throughout the show. And this is where it gets real interesting and real cartoonish, because listen to this, guys. Triple H will be facing The Rock in a Brahma Bull Rope Match. He will be facing The Undertaker in a casket match. And you can see where this is headed, right? A bunch of gimmicks going on. He will be facing Mankind in a Boiler Room Brawl. He will be in an Infernal Match with Kane. Now, that's a match where you have fire surrounded by the ring and you have to light your opponent on fire and burn him. And finally, Triple H will face The Big Show in a Chokeslam Challenge match. Now, for those of you that don't know who The Big Show is, this is a 7 feet tall gentleman, and it's probably going to be impossible for Triple H to win a match like this. And, this is something that, you think a good guy babyface would have to go through, right? Having to get put through the ringer and put in all these impossible situations to win. But no, it's weird having the heel go through this. And there's another caveat to this this stipulation is that Triple H, he's going to give him a bit of a fair chance, as Vince says. And he says he doesn't have to win all of them. He doesn't have to win all the matches, right? But he has to win at least 3 of them in order to compete in the six-pack challenge for the WWE title at the Unforgiven pay-per-view. So it's going to be quite a night for Triple H, and obviously it's going to be a Triple H-themed heavy show. But it's all set up, it's all consistent, and it's all for a purpose, because this is all for the pay-per-view. It's all to hype it up. Is Triple H going to make it to the main event of the pay-per-view? Is he, what kind of matches could we expect throughout SmackDown? Like I said, it's very cartoonish, using all these gimmick matches in one night, and it kind of takes away the special feel of them. And let's take a quick break here, and then because this is a big show, that there's a lot going on as we head into Unforgiven 99 on pay-per-view. And if you're going to be watching those shows, I encourage you all. I'm just reviewing the SmackDowns, but this is where we are at this point in my journey. We are headed towards Unforgiven 99, and we'll be right back.
hell yeah.
You can't see me!
She's out, Doc.
I-O-N. Submission.
This is great! This is awesome! And it's boom drop time for Kofi. With an RKO out of nowhere!
All hail the queen.
What is this maniac doing? The dead man has risen! Oh no!
What is that smell?
If you smell what the Rock is cooking! We got a new champion! We got a new champion!
Welcome back, and we are just about, I want to say, a week and a half away from Smackdown making its gigantic move to the Fox network. It's going to be a huge event. We know Kofi Kingston's going to be defending the WWE Championship against Brock Lesnar. That's the first time Brock's competed on a Smackdown show since about 2004. So it's been a hot minute. But anyways, looking forward to that. But in the meantime, let's get back on with this episode of Smackdown on 9/23/1999. So before the break, we were talking about Vince putting Triple H to the ringer, and this is the first of his matchups. It's the Chokeslam Challenge. Triple H remains in the ring, and out comes the Big Show, and they have their match. Again, this is going to be a very Triple H heavy show, so he's going to be in it throughout, and he's going to have to wrestle multiple matches. So this little brawl here is not obviously not good, but it's also not long, so that's a plus for the viewers. Big Show is able to get the win here very easily, of course, winning by chokeslam. So Big Show retains, and Triple H has now dug himself a hole, is down 0-1. Remember, he has to win 3 of the 5 matchups tonight on the Smackdown episode in order to compete for the six-pack challenge for the WWE title at Unforgiven. It is also learned on this episode of Smackdown that Chris Jericho has challenged Ken Shamrock to a first blood match against so many gimmick matches on this show. What is this, Extreme Rules? Is this where they got the idea from and not ECW? I mean, there's just so many stipulated matches here. And here, let's go ahead and might as well just add another one, right? We have an Infernal match. What the hell? First blood. We cut to a shot of the referees who are still on strike. So, as we stated last week, there's replacement referees going on everywhere in any of these WWE matchups. Continued on Raw, and it's still happening here on SmackDown. Only this time, they get attacked by the Dudley Boys, which we don't know why. Apparently, this has to do with some form of connection that one of the referees has to the Acolytes, who they will be facing at the pay-per-view, and that's all that we ever hear or see about this situation. So next, we cut to an interview with Chris Jericho, Lillian Garcia, asking him why he wants this first blood match with Ken Shamrock. This is basically just hyping up Jericho, talking about he's the best, and he calls Ken Shamrock here Ken Scamrock, which is a nice touch. Jericho is really good at giving all these like nicknames, mocking people and their wrestler names. Anyways, he guarantees victory. Real short promo interview here. And it's all just to hype up Jericho and the matchup later tonight. Next, we have the WWE European Championship match. Mark Henry to defend against XPac. Now, this is interesting because D'Lo Brown is scheduled to face Mark Henry at the pay-per-view for that very same title. He does come down to ringside to join on the commentary. This is a very short match. Again, there's a lot to get through. Really interesting result here as, Henry continues to jar at D'Lo, who's at ringside. D'Lo saying, hey, you don't want any part of this. You don't want a piece of this. And while Mark Henry is doing this towards the end of the match, X-Pac is able to get himself back up from getting beat down by Henry throughout the match. And he roundhouse kicks him over the top rope. And somehow X-Pac wins the matchup by countout. So Mark Henry, the champion, loses to X-Pac, who's not even challenging for this championship. So shouldn't that automatically put X-Pac into the European Championship match this Sunday at Unforgiven? logic would state yes, but not here because the feud is obviously about D'Lo and Mark Henry and going off of, their friendship deteriorating from SummerSlam and the events that happened there. And that's why we're getting this matchup Sunday between these two. But it's really interesting. XPac gets the win. D'Lo Brown and Mark Henry brawl after the match. And again, it's all just hyping and setting up their confrontation for Unforgiven. Next, we have an interview with Lillian Garcia. She's talking to Luna. And Luna is wanting to challenge Ivory to a hardcore match. Not for tonight because there's just too many gimmick matches already. So she wants her matchup with Ivory at Unforgiven for the women's title to be a hardcore match. And that's basically all what this interview is. We'll see if Ivory responds as we continue to run down this show. Next up, we have Jeff Jarrett, who's accompanied by Miss Kitty. And there's obviously no Deborah. And let me explain a little bit. So on Monday Night Raw, Jeff Jarrett had a mixed tag match with Deborah against Test and Stephanie McMahon. There was a point in the match where Jeff Jarrett was trying to tag Deborah and she didn't want any part of it. So obviously this enraged Jarrett and he ended up scolding Deborah, putting her in the figure 4 leg lock, just continuing to show his misogynistic side and dominance. Great heat on this guy, even though the material here is very sensitive nowadays. WWE could not get away with a storyline like this in 2019. But here it's 99, whatever, it's anything goes, no rules. So he's, again, just being misogynistic in this promo, talking about, men being better than women. There's a stage manager, production person on the outside of the ring while this promo's going on. It's obviously a woman. And he's intimidating her. He's poking at her, asks her to get in the ring, and then, just continues to intimidate her and puts her in a figure 4 leg lock. And finally, we get some type of, hero type complex here from China, who finally comes to the rescue, makes the save, knocks out Jeff Jarrett with a frying pan, covers him in that cooking apron, which Jeff Jarrett put on China, which I believe was an episode or two ago on Smackdown. And to put the nail on the coffin for him, she de-pantses Jeff Jarrett and puts on the pants herself and says how she's going to be wearing the pants on Sunday and she's also going to be the Intercontinental Champion. Now, I don't know why it took all this long for China to get involved, while Jarrett has also just been, running rampant on all these women in the Raws and Smackdowns that have been leading up to this pay-per-view. But good to see China finally getting involved here. It worked. Crowd is behind her, even though she's still with Triple H. On the other side of things, again, this just feels like a separate world, and China's, getting such babyface reactions as it concerns Jeff Jarrett. And again, their match is hyped up. Up next, we have the Infernal Match, Kane versus Triple H. Now, this is probably, I know I said there's no good Kane Triple H matches, but if I guess I had to pick one that I would probably rewatch, this one was not that bad. It was back and forth, and the flames surrounding the ring is what gives it that added bonus and makes it more exciting to watch. And I'm sure it was, hell to be there literally at ringside. I can imagine the flames being super hot, and even the wrestlers, I can imagine it not being that much of a fun environment to work in. Anyways, it's a decent enough match, and we're wondering, there's no way Kane's going to lose this matchup, right? This is already the second Infernal match in 1999. We had one earlier in the year with Kane and The Undertaker. So already this match has already lost its luster. This is a match that should just be brought up once a decade or something like that. But we already have two in 99, so it's kind of watered down here by this point. Anyways, during this matchup, Kane gets distracted because he looks up at the staging area and he sees XPac there laid out, bloodied up. And we see that the work has been done by The Undertaker, Mideon, and Viscera. They've obviously beat the hell out of XPac. This in turn, gets Kane super angry. He leaps over the ring, leaps over the top rope, and he lands on Mideon and Viscera, and Viscera and Mideon are able to recuperate and get the upper hand and throw Kane into the fire. Hand gets lighted on, and I guess Kane apparently loses the match because the bell rings and the ref declares Triple H the winner. So I guess it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be the actual opponent to set you on fire. It's just as long as if you set on fire, you lose. So I guess that's how the rules go for that. Because I don't remember it being like that whenever they brought out the rules for the first Infernal match. But whatever. This is on TV. We're just trying to advance the storyline here. Again, major stuff intersecting here. So Kane goes up, tries to, console X-Pac. He's there. He's angry. And, his hand's on fire, whatever. And then all of a sudden they cut to another shot because it goes back to Triple H in the ring. Then it goes back to X-Pac and Kane who are up in the stage. All of a sudden Kane's arm's just not on fire anymore. So, again, this wasn't a live show, so it was taped. So it could easily have been a quick edit or cut. So I thought that was funny. They go to commercial and they come back. Kane's in the back, just losing his mind. And meanwhile, X-Pac is right there, laying right beside him, bloodied. Shouldn't he be at the medical attention, seeking help? So it's just weird. His body just laying there and he's all bleeding, and Kane's just losing his mind. Up next, we have Lillian Garcia, who's interviewing the Undertaker. She's wanting to get her thoughts on what just transpired there with X-Pac. And Undertaker's basically saying Kane got what he deserved by betraying him. And, as Taker's trying to leave, he says, our work is done here for the night. Lillian Garcia says, hey, Taker, you can't leave. You have a casket match against the Triple H coming up. And Undertaker's like, nobody tells me what to do or what I want to do. If I'm going to leave, I'm going to leave. And as he's walking, here comes Vince McMahon. Tell him, hey, you're going to compete in this casket match. And Undertaker's saying, no, I'm not. You don't tell me what to do. And Vince is telling him, well, if you don't compete in this match, you're not going to compete in the six-pack challenge at the pay-per-view. And then Undertaker says, well, maybe I just won't compete in anything at all. And he basically just walks out. And I've been saying it now for weeks now. I've been teasing it on the episodes. I think this is the final appearance of The Undertaker that we're going to see for a while, either to heal up from injury or whether he asked for time off. Not really sure on the specifics, but I'm more than certain it's an injury. So again, we're not going to see The Undertaker in WWE until May of 2000. So it's going to be quite a while until we see Undertaker pop up on SmackDown again. And that's the end for him. And that goes to commercial. And we come back. And it's The Rock who's out for a promo. Now this is just quick and, just Rock trying to eat up with the crowd. They're in Dallas. The Stanley Cup champion Dallas Stars are in the house. And The Rock incorporates them into his promo and to hype them up. Mankind comes out. They're going back and forth. And this brings out the return of Road Dogg, who has apparently been out from injury for quite a while or hadn't been competing. And he's talking about how nobody wants to see the Boiler Room match. Nobody wants to see the Brahma Bull Rope match later on tonight. What they want to see is Rock and Mankind defend the tag team titles. Crowd begins to start riling up, and we see that Road Dogg and Billy Gunn have reunited as the New Age Outlaws, and that's fine and whatnot. But the commentary team here of Michael Cole and Michael Hayes make it out like it's the greatest reunion in the history of wrestling. I mean, you have The Rock, who's in the center of the ring, who's like the biggest thing going right now, along with Steve Austin. And they're talking about the New Age Outlaws getting back together as if it's like the greatest thing since sliced bread. Which I thought was really hilarious. Like, the crowd likes it; they're into it. That's awesome. So, we get an impromptu WWE Tag Team Championship match. The New Age Outlaws challenging The Rock and Mankind. Obviously, The Rock's not in full athletic gear. Yes, he's got a muscle shirt and those sports pants on, and he's got his boots. But this is impromptu, so it just happens out of nowhere. And it's weird having a lot of these matches just happen out of nowhere and they just start. There's authority figures, but it's cool when matches like this just happen and whatnot. So they have this match, and it's, a pretty basic tag team match. There's a mishap at the end with Road Dogg throwing Mankind into the ropes. He trips on his injured leg, I think, which had been worked on during the match. Knocks The Rock off the apron, so in turn they collide. And the Road Dogg pins Mankind, and we have new tag team champions. And yes, I should have explained earlier, The Rock and Mankind had just won the tag team titles back from The Undertaker and Big Show on this past episode of Monday Night Raw. So, just like that, we have new tag team champions. Again, the belts are just flying around. I'm not okay with that. I'm still not okay with that. I like when champions have somewhat of a length just to establish themselves. But Rock and Mankind, I guess they don't need the belts at this point, but it's also just dumb. Why even put the belts back on them if you were just going to have them lose? I would have much rather have Undertaker and Big Show take the loss here at this point. And again, you could have hyped up the New Age Outlaws more, but we don't really know what they are yet. Good guys, bad guys. Crowd's cheering them, so they're into it. So they're okay with this title change. And it's not like the Outlaws were doing any dastardly things. They just won off of a mishap between The Rock and Mankind. They look, Rock looks pissed after the match, but he kind of just leaves. He's got bigger fish to fry. He's got to face Triple H later on. And then, of course, he has his sights set on the WWE Championship, which is ultimately what it's all about for him. Up next, we have Vince McMahon in the back who's talking to Mideon and Viscera. He says that even though The Undertaker's not there and walked out, that there's still going to be a casket match, only now it's going to be a handicap casket match, as Triple H will now be facing Mideon and Viscera. So, woo, that gets me excited. Sarcasm. Next, we have Chyna talking with Triple H, and, she's talking about how all this whole thing with Vince and all these gimmick matches has gone too far. Triple H wants to prove himself, and he says because he's going to win at Unforgiven. Again, he's acting like a real babyface here, even though he's not. So, again, this whole setup here is just real weird, and this is not something that a bad guy usually goes through, And if I'm watching this as the fan I am now, I could easily tell you, Triple H is going to win the belt at the pay-per-view. They're putting him through all this nonsense. There's no way he's just not going to win on Sunday and become the champion again. Up next is the casket match between Mideon and Viscera against Triple H. Real short match, not too long. Triple H does put Mideon in the casket, and he thinks he's won the match, but out comes Shane McMahon. Again, this is very, Shane McMahon's the good guy, but they're kind of flipping the roles here because this is not how it usually works. So he comes out, and he says that he actually has to beat both of the opponents at the same time. So he has to put both of them in the casket at the same time, not just one of them. And it's going to be kind of impossible for Triple H to do in this matchup because the casket is not too big, but also just Viscera is just this gigantic guy, just huge guy. And along with Mideon, there's no way they're going to fit in that little casket. So the beatdown continues, and Mideon and Viscera get one up on Triple H. So now he's 1-2 on the evening. He's got 2 more matches to go, and we're going to see if he can tally up his win total to 3. Because remember, he has to win 3 in order to advance to the championship challenge match, the 6-pack challenge at Unforgiven. Next up, we got an interview with Lillian Garcia and Ivory. She wants Ivory's response to Luna challenging her for a hardcore title match at Unforgiven. Ivory's a little hesitant at first, but says that the title now has prestige, and she doesn't want Luna to ruin any of that. So of course she accepts for the title match, it being Hardcore Rules Sunday at Unforgiven. The Hollies come out for a promo. Hardcore Holly talks about taking out the Big Boss Man on Monday Night Raw. He knocked him out with a candy jar, and he's talking about how he did this favor for Al Snow by doing that to him. But now he wants the favor returned, which I'm assuming is that he wants a hardcore championship match from Al Snow. Al Snow comes out not wearing the hardcore belt. I'm pretty sure he's a champ because that's what happened. The British Bulldog gave him the belt after he won it for him and then just handed it to him. So I'm pretty sure he's the champion. And Michael Cole continues to hype up the Kennel from Hell matchup that's going to take place at the pay-per-view between Al Snow and Big Boss Man. Anyways, Hardcore Holly and Al Snow have this quick matchup. Crash Holly tries to get involved at some point with a cookie pan. Al Snow is able to take it away, knock out Crash Holly, but Hardcore is able to get the upper hand on Al Snow. Picks up the pinfall victory, which in turn should make Hardcore Holly the number 1 contender, or he should at least be added to this match that he's going to have with the Boss Man, because it's going to be for the hardcore title. And again, I don't understand the logic here in pinning and having your champions lose going into the pay-per-view. Then you're just creating more confusion in the audience, especially with me, as I'm looking at these in hindsight. That doesn't make any sense for Hardcore Holly to win this match because he's not involved in the storyline. The Boss Man comes out afterwards, knocks out Hardcore Holly, starts to beat up on Al Snow. He's got a can of dog food, feeds it to Al Snow, and that's where we leave off. And they have that dreaded Kennel from Hell match on Sunday. I can't tell you guys. I'm not going to talk about it here on the podcast, but this match was so bad. It's so bad. And just if you have the WWE Network, just peek in on it It looks cool, and when I'm talking about it, it sounds cool. But this match was just one of the biggest disasters in the history of WWE. Up next, we got the Boiler Room Brawl, Mankind and Triple H. We see a shot of Triple H in the back with one of the replacement referees trying to explain, how do I win this matchup? And it's the ref telling him that, he's going to go into this boiler room, and whoever comes out of it, whoever comes out of this door that he's pointing to, wins the match. And it's just your standard, no different than any backstage brawl, and then them going through different, items, ring poles and, all this stuff, tables and whatever. And Mankind has got Triple H set up on on something, and he's laid out. And, Mankind looks like he's going to get the victory. Goes up to, a top, roofing area where you could do, a dive onto him. And we see somebody on the side. You don't see who. You just see the item object. You see, a pole, just poke at Mankind. And it knocks him off the top into a table. He's out for the count. Triple H is able to escape and win the Boiler Room Brawl. So now he's 2-2. We don't know who it was that knocked out Mankind off the top. I want to assume it was China, but it's never known and never explained. And Triple H has one more match, and if he can win, he'll be in the six-pack challenge. Up next, we have the British Bulldog, who is backstage, apparently looking for Vince McMahon for some reason. Real quick shot of that. Next, we have the First Blood match with Chris Jericho and Ken Shamrock. I want to say that them having this match here, a gimmick match, makes no sense. Why? They're going to fight at the pay-per-view, right? One-on-one. In a regular match. Now, when you have a gimmick match, that's whenever you're trying to end a feud, or just it's escalated this far that it has to do. You have to end it with some type of stipulation. Why would you do that match first before your regular matchup to hype up the pay-per-view? That makes no sense. But that's just what they do here. Chris Jericho comes out dressed up as a hockey player, obviously all covered up, so he won't have any opportunity to get cut open or bleed, because that's the only way to win this matchup is the first person to make their opponent bleed wins. And it's a real quick match. Again, a lot of these matches back in the Attitude Era were super short. They're not like today's, superstars where the matches go on for 10, 15 minutes and even have commercial breaks in between them. These are just real quick and to the point. Curtis Hughes, Chris Jericho's lackey, gets involved in the match, and they beat down on Shamrock. Obviously, no disqualification because it's First Blood. Anything goes. Chris Jericho's got his hockey stick, starts to beat up on Shamrock's ribs, and then finally lands on him with a splash off the top rope. Obviously, Jericho dressed as a hockey player. He's got pads all on him, and this is supposed to, set the stage for Shamrock to bleed from the inside internally, as the commentators say, and you see Shamrock bleeding from the mouth. Ref calls for it. Jericho wins. And, Sunday on pay-per-view, it's supposed to be Jericho versus Shamrock. But just spoiler alert, it ends up being XPac. I need to find out the what happened here, whether Ken Shamrock just didn't show up for this or was injured. I'm not saying from the blood thing, but maybe he had a real injury. And again, I think this is probably the last time that we're going to see Ken Shamrock in WWE for good. I'll get more information on that, and I'll inform you in the next episode on what happened to Ken Shamrock, whether storyline or not. Because again, I'm watching these. I don't remember a lot of the early Smackdowns because I didn't have UPN as a kid. So, I'll update you on that. But Jericho doesn't end up facing Ken Shamrock at the pay-per-view come Sunday for Unforgiven. Up next, we got a shot of the British Bulldog with Vince McMahon. He's telling Vince that he wants a championship match. He told him that in January he would get a shot, which is just oddly specific. And obviously we haven't seen the Bulldog up until now, so it's weird for him to say that. He told him he would get a championship match in January. Were they just holding off on re-debuting the British Bulldog up until now? Maybe they just didn't have plans for him back then. But Vince says that he wants to be in the six-pack challenge, and Vince just obliges. Obviously, we're not going to have the Undertaker in that matchup, as I just told you. And also, the British Bulldog wants to special guest referee the Brahma Bull Rope Match between Triple H and The Rock. And again, Vince McMahon just agrees and lets him be that. And finally, we have the main event, the Brahma Bull match. The Rock versus Triple H, and yet another main event. They're just killing us to death with these Rock Triple H matches, but they find ways to make it completely interesting. And again, we don't care because the characters are just so over, and the storylines are so good. We want to see Triple H lose and see if he doesn't make it to the six-pack challenge. They're having this match. They're going through the crowd and everything. They go up the staging area. During at one point in this match, Jeff Jarrett does show up, knocks out Chyna, who's accompanying Triple H in this matchup. She's out there at ringside. Chyna's looking up at the stage. Jeff Jarrett comes up from behind, knocks her with a frying pan, puts her in the figure 4 leg lock, and then leaves her for dead there on the floor. Rock and Triple H continue to brawl up the staging area until they make their way back into the ring. And finally, The Rock gets the upper hand, hits the rock bottom on Triple H. Looks like he's about to do the people's elbow. And out of nowhere, wham, the British Bulldog clotheslines The Rock, eventually turning heel here because we didn't know what the British Bulldog was. We saw him helping out Al Snow a couple of weeks ago to get the hardcore title back. So I guess we thought that the British Bulldog was a good guy here, but no. Apparently he's been in cahoots with Triple H. We see them celebrating at the end at the staging area. It's British Bulldog, Triple H, and apparently Chyna, who also awoken from that beatdown she got from Jeff Jarrett. And this is kind of like the same ending that happened at the network premiere Smackdown with Shawn Michaels and all that stuff. So it's kind of a retread here. So it's whatever. It's not that big of a deal because the British Bulldog is not as big as Shawn Michaels. So Triple H wins the match 3-2. He ends up being in the six-pack challenge, and that's where we leave off here on SmackDown. Obviously, the pay-per-view coming up next. And that's going to do it for this episode of SmackDown. Thank you for joining me. And like I said, if you want to check out Unforgiven, you're more than welcome to if you're following this little spin-off series. I'm not going to watch it, but I do know what happens. I won't spoil it for you all. I'll talk about it maybe on the next episode, depending on where the storylines are at that point. I'll talk a little bit about that. But it's more just I want to do this show to talk about what's happening on SmackDown. Yes, everything that happens on these shows are all to lead to pay-per-views, but I just want to mainly talk about specifically the content that's being held on these shows. So that's basically what it's all about. So I'll spruce in what's going on in the pay-per-views here and then. But yeah, that's going to do it. I'll leave you here with a little teaser for Unforgiven 1999. We'll see you next time on Palace Off the Top Rope presents SmackDown.
6 determined contenders.
They all want Triple H. This is a game that you don't want to be in.
1 enforcer, hell-bent on revenge.
Hey, that's her hell.
Triple H, The Rock, Mankind, The Bulldog, The Big Show, Kane. 1 epic battle for the undisputed World Wrestling Federation Championship. WWF Unforgiven, presented live by Magic the Gathering Trading Cards. Tonight on pay-per-view.